Listen carefully, this is not a dream. Archangel Michael is shouting through the veil. The loved one you buried still sees what's coming for your grandchildren. Their voice trembles from the other side. They've seen a curse forming, a financial storm written in secret papers with your family's name on it. You have seconds to act before heaven seals the warning forever. Don't ignore this, because once the seal closes, no amount of prayer will open it again. The night was silent, but the air was heavy, a pressure that felt like grief returning in waves. You woke up at 3:03 a.m., heart racing, unsure why. You checked your phone, no calls, no messages. But something inside you whispered, "You're being watched." You tried to dismiss it, but then, in the corner of your eye, you saw the flicker of a golden light. The smell of roses filled the air, the scent of someone you once loved who had passed away. And in that instant, you knew, they were here. "My beloved," the voice said, soft but trembling, "I cannot rest. A storm is coming for your grandchildren. Their names are being written into a contract that looks like a blessing but hides a curse. The papers are filled with money, but the ink is dark." You froze. Your loved one's tone wasn't angry, it was desperate. They spoke of hands signing deals, of people pretending kindness, of promises of prosperity that lead only to ruin. "The curse is not in gold or paper," the voice continued. "It's in greed, in the illusion of gain that hides spiritual loss. The enemy is trying to make your bloodline chase wealth that costs them their peace." And then, for a brief second, the light shifted, and behind your loved one, another presence appeared. Stronger. Brighter. A voice like thunder, but calm as the ocean. "I am Michael, commander of heaven's armies," it said. "And I have been sent to intercept this curse before it is sealed." The room trembled. The scent of roses turned to ozone. You saw wings spread wide, filling your vision. Every atom in the air felt alive with electricity. "The ancestors have tried to warn you in dreams," Michael said. "They have whispered through signs, through coincidences, through the numbers you keep seeing. But time is running out. The curse will finalize in 72 hours unless faith breaks it." You dropped to your knees, shaking. "What must I do?" you whispered. Michael's sword glowed white-hot. "First," he said, "you must speak their names in prayer. Not to summon, but to release. Forgive what was owed. Tear the invisible contract. Heaven will do the rest." And then his tone softened. "Do not fear money," he said. "Fear attachment. Gold is not the enemy, idolatry is. What the darkness offers fast, it takes faster." As he spoke, the golden light began to flicker. Your loved one's face turned peaceful, no longer desperate. "They will be safe," she said. "As long as you listen." Then, with one final flash of light, both vanished, leaving behind only a single white feather resting on your pillow. You reached for it. It was warm. The next morning the feather was still there, untouched, glowing faintly when the sunlight crossed it. You stared at it for a long time. It shouldn't have stayed warm overnight, but it had. The air around it hummed, faint, like a living pulse. That was the first sign that what you had seen wasn't a dream. You tried to move through the day as if nothing had happened. You made coffee, answered messages, smiled when your grandchildren called. But beneath every normal sound was another rhythm, soft, deliberate, like invisible pages turning somewhere behind the world. Each time you heard it, you remembered the words from the night before. The curse will finalize in 72 hours unless faith breaks it. When the clock struck noon, the air shifted again. A faint shimmer passed across the wall, like heat bending light. Then a voice came, low but clear, filling the room without echo. It has begun. You turned. Archangel Michael stood where the light had been, the sword in his right hand burning with colorless flame. His eyes were not stern, they were sorrowful. The curse did not start with greed, he said. It started with fear. Long ago, one of your ancestors made a promise in desperation, to keep a home, to protect a child, to feed the hungry. The promise was pure, but the bargain was twisted. The agreement tied your bloodline to worry, to the belief that money is never enough. That belief became a chain. He lifted the sword slightly, and in the air between you appeared an image, a parchment covered in shifting symbols, each one glowing a sickly green. On it were names, familiar surnames, your family's, written again and again, repeating down the centuries. The parchment pulsed like something alive. This is the hidden contract, Michael said. It renews itself every generation through fear, each time a parent teaches a child that security is more important than peace. You felt a chill. So my grandchildren are next, he said gently. Unless the pattern breaks. He stepped closer, and the contract dissolved into a whirl of light and shadow. But the curse cannot survive where truth is spoken. Tonight you will speak words of release, not to the past, but to the promise that replaced trust with panic. You will bless what you already have. You will thank heaven for what is not yet visible. Gratitude burns the roots of greed. The sword flared brighter, and symbols began to fade. You watched as some of the glowing names vanished. Michael looked toward the window. Your loved one, the one who warned you, was allowed to speak because her prayer was never finished. She asked heaven to let her protect her descendants one last time. That permission was granted through you. Tears welled in your eyes. She always worried about them, you whispered. Worry was her armor, Michael said softly. But worry never saved anyone. Faith does. That is the final correction her soul desired. He raised his hand again. The feather on the table lifted into the air, hovering between you. Its glow intensified until it became almost blinding. When the light dimmed, it was no longer a feather, it was a small scroll, sealed with a thread of gold. "This is the reversal," Michael said. "A blessing written in the same ink once used for the curse. Read it aloud at sunset. Say the words with love, not fear. The moment you finish, the contract will close itself." You took the scroll, your fingers trembling. The moment you touched it, warmth flooded your chest, the same warmth you had felt when the message first arrived. For the first time, you felt not just fear but authority. You understood, this was not punishment, it was restoration. Michael sheathed his sword. "Remember," he said, "no curse survives gratitude, no deception survives confession. Tell your grandchildren the truth, not about magic, but about value. Teach them that what they own is not who they are." He paused, the light around him thinning. "The moment they believe that," he said, "the chain will finally break." Then he was gone, leaving only the scroll glowing faintly in your hands and the echo of his last words drifting through the room like wind through leaves. "Break fear, and fortune will follow." You looked down at the scroll, heart steady now. Outside, the day was slipping toward evening, the first hints of orange touching the sky. You whispered to the unseen, "I'm ready." The feather's warmth pulsed once more, and you felt, for the first time in years, that your family's story was about to turn toward light. Heaven says, the same fear that built the curse can be the fire that ends it. Speak gratitude, release control, and the chain will break. Tap like if you accept this freedom, subscribe for more Archangel Michael messages, and comment, "My family is free." Because faith, once spoken, rewrites every generation that follows. The sky that evening looked alive, streaks of amber and crimson woven through clouds like ribbons of molten fire. The world itself seemed to wait, holding its breath as the sun began its slow descent. You stood by the window with the golden scroll in your hands. It pulsed faintly, the same rhythm as your heartbeat. Every second it grew warmer, as though the light within it could sense that the appointed hour was near. When the sun touched the horizon, the air around you shifted again. A low hum filled the room, not sound, but vibration. It was the same frequency that had filled the air on the night you first saw Michael. You closed your eyes, took a deep breath, and whispered, "I'm ready." The scroll unrolled on its own, the gold thread dissolving into the air. Lines of light formed words across the parchment, not ink, but living energy. The language was celestial, ancient, yet somehow you could read it as though your soul already knew what each line meant. By the power of gratitude, by the authority of love, I sever every agreement made in fear. I return wealth to wisdom, ownership to stewardship, and blessing to trust. Let the inheritance of this family be peace, not panic, plenty, not pride. As you read, the room filled with wind. Candles flickered even though you hadn't lit any. Outside, a flock of birds took flight all at once, forming a spiral in the orange sky. Then, the voice came again. Michael's. It filled the entire house, not loud but commanding, resonant enough to make the glass tremble. Keep reading, beloved. The curse weakens with every word. You swallowed hard, continuing. What was signed in darkness is now unscripted in light. No fear shall fund this bloodline. No deceit shall profit here. What was taken unjustly shall be returned sevenfold in joy. With every word, the scroll glowed brighter until its light spilled across the floor, tracing golden veins along the walls. You heard faint cries, not of pain, but of release, as though spirits bound to this old contract were finally being freed. A gust of wind rushed through the room, and in that wind you saw shapes, faces of those who came before you, ancestors whose lives had been spent in worry. They looked at you with gratitude before fading into peace. Then Michael appeared once more, but not in the towering, armored form you'd seen before. This time his light was softer, his wings half-folded, his expression calm. "It is done," he said. "The bloodline is restored." The scroll burst into pure light and vanished. The air settled instantly. Silence. Peace. You fell to your knees, tears slipping down your face, not from sorrow but from the strange weight of joy. You realized that generations of tension, of scarcity, of endless striving had just ended, not with struggle, but with surrender. Michael knelt beside you, his hand hovering inches above your shoulder. The money curse is not destroyed, it is transformed. Wealth will still come to your descendants, but it will no longer own them. The test now becomes stewardship. Prosperity will serve them, not enslave them. He looked toward the west, where the sun had vanished and twilight spread like ink. Before dawn, you will feel the air change again. That will be the sign that your family's record has been rewritten. You nodded, still trembling. "What do I do now?" "Rest," he said. "Pray. Teach them to thank before they ask. Gratitude is heaven's currency." And then, as the last light disappeared, he extended his hand. In his palm appeared the same feather that had begun it all, only now it burned with pure white light. "Keep this," he said. "When doubt visits, hold it. It will remind you that heaven interferes for those who listen." He smiled once, softly, almost humanly, and stepped backward into the dark. The light around him folded like wings closing after flight. Then he was gone. The house was still again. You stood in silence, the feather warm in your hand, the scent of roses faintly filling the air once more. Outside, a single star appeared above the horizon. It pulsed 3 times, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat, and you knew. The curse was gone. Heaven says, the fear that followed your bloodline ends tonight. The curse of loss has turned into the covenant of abundance. Your grandchildren will not inherit struggle, they will inherit wisdom. Tap like to claim this blessing, subscribe for more Archangel Michael messages, and comment, "My family walks in divine provision." Because when faith finishes what fear began, even the darkest contract must surrender to light. Before dawn, a thin light appeared on the horizon, soft, silver, hesitant, like the first breath after a long cry. You hadn't slept, peace had made you alert, aware of every sound, the ticking clock, the slow rhythm of your heartbeat, the way the house itself seemed to hum quietly, as if it had begun to breathe again. When the first bird called, the air changed. The warmth that had filled your chest since the ritual expanded outward, gentle but unstoppable. It spread through the walls, across the floor, into every corner of the house. And then, as if drawn by the same current, the feather you held rose from your palm and floated into the air. It glowed brighter than it ever had before, the white of dawn mixing with faint blue light. You heard Michael's voice again, not booming, not even close, but near, steady, and calm. Look toward the horizon, beloved. The curse has ended, but the blessing has just begun. You walked to the window. Outside, the first full rays of sunrise touched the earth, and everything looked reborn, grass glistening as if washed clean, air shimmering in gold. And there, in the distance, something flickered like heat rising from the ground. You realized it wasn't heat. It was energy, streams of light weaving between rooftops, flowing like invisible rivers from one home to another. These are the pathways of provision, Michael said. Where there was lack, heaven now plants flow. The same currency the enemy meant for ruin will now be used for restoration. You felt tears in your eyes. So my grandchildren will inherit peace instead of panic, he replied. But they must learn stewardship, not consumption. You will teach them that true wealth begins with gratitude. Tell them that every dollar earned honestly is a seed of light. Every act of generosity is a shield. Every prayer spoken over their work is a foundation stone. The feather in the air spun slowly and dissolved into faint motes of gold that drifted downward until they disappeared. You realized the gift had been absorbed into you. Michael continued. The fear of losing will never own them again, unless they forget the lesson. Keep gratitude alive in this house. Let laughter echo through it. Laughter is heaven's signature after victory. Then his tone deepened, solemn but kind. Tonight, the spirits that haunted your family's fortune will stand before the throne of correction. Their power has been revoked. The balance sheet of your bloodline has been rewritten in light. What was taken unjustly will return, not always as money, but as opportunity, health, peace, and unexpected favor. These are heaven's currencies. You could feel it as he spoke, something unlocking in the air, like a dam breaking far upstream. The weight that had pressed your shoulders for years, the anxiety over bills, the endless worry over enough, it was gone. In its place, a calm certainty settled in your spirit. You were provided for. This is the covenant of dawn, Michael said. Every morning that follows will remind you that heaven begins again. Teach your family to bless sunrise and release sunset. That rhythm will keep their gates open to divine flow. He moved closer to the light streaming through the window. The glow from outside merged with the light around him until it was impossible to tell where angel ended and morning began. "Beloved," he said softly, "heaven doesn't reward greed, it multiplies gratitude. What you have done tonight will echo through 1,000 mornings." He looked over his shoulder one last time. "Live lightly now. The curse is forgotten. The ledger of your lineage has been reset to grace." And with that, he stepped into the light and vanished completely. You stood there for a long while, breathing the air that shimmered faintly with peace. Outside, the world moved on, cars passed, children laughed on their way to school, but you knew reality had changed. The unseen had shifted permanently. When your grandchildren visited later that week, they ran through the house laughing, spilling joy into every room. One of them picked up the old photo of your lost loved one and smiled. "Grandma," the child said, "she looks happy." Was she? You smiled through quiet tears. Now she is. The wind moved softly through the open window, carrying the faint scent of roses again. Heaven says, "What began as a curse ends as a covenant." The wealth of your family will now serve peace, not pride. Every generation that thanks before asking will inherit favor that never fades. Tap like to seal this dawn over your family, subscribe for more Archangel Michael messages, and comment, "My lineage walks in gratitude." Because when faith closes one chapter, heaven always opens a brighter one. Days passed, and the house no longer felt haunted by invisible heaviness. Everything ordinary glowed slightly, the light through the curtains, the smell of bread baking, the laughter of your grandchildren echoing down the hall. Yet peace, you soon learned, is not a trophy, it is a discipline. And every gift heaven gives must be guarded by gratitude. One afternoon, the first small test arrived. A letter came in the mail, official, heavy paper, stamped with the name of a financial institution you recognized. Your chest tightened for a moment, the old instinct of fear tried to speak. But you remembered Michael's words, "Gratitude burns the roots of greed." You held the letter, whispered, "Thank you for what this will teach me," and opened it. Inside was not bad news. It was an error notice, an old debt finally cleared from your name. A zero balance, stamped, paid in full. You smiled, not because of the money, but because the timing was precise, the same week the curse had broken. It was heaven's confirmation written in human ink. That night you sat with your grandchildren. You didn't speak of curses or angels. Instead, you told stories about work, honesty, patience, about how every coin earned should be a prayer answered, not a worry avoided. They listened, their eyes wide. One of them, the youngest, asked, "Grandma, is money good or bad?" You thought of Michael's flame, of the scroll dissolving into light, and answered, "It depends on the heart that holds it." As they slept later, the feather that had vanished in the morning reappeared on your bedside table. It glowed faintly again, pulsing once, twice, 3 times. And you understood, peace was not permanent without participation. Each generation would need to choose it. Each would need to keep gratitude alive. The next morning, a gentle breeze moved through the room even though the windows were closed. The same warm presence filled the air. You didn't see Michael this time, but you heard him clearly. "Beloved light-bearer, the covenant is proven not by miracles, but by memory. Remember what you have seen. Tell it not as fear, but as faith. The next trial will not be a curse, it will be a choice." You asked quietly, "What choice?" When plenty returns, do not forget the provider. When your family prospers, teach them to give before they gather. This is how heaven measures stewardship. A hand that closes cannot receive. Then the presence faded, leaving behind a stillness that glowed with confidence rather than worry. You stood at the window again and saw sunlight strike the ground in long, soft bands, like paths. Somewhere deep in your heart you knew, those paths were opening under your grandchildren's feet already. You looked up and whispered, "Thank you." The words felt powerful, alive, and the air answered with a warmth that wrapped you completely. That evening, the scent of roses returned one final time. You recognized it, not as a visitation, but as a reminder. The loved one who had started this chain of warnings was now at peace. Her mission was finished. You smiled through tears and said, "Rest now. We're safe." Outside, the sunset painted the sky the same color as that first warning night, but this time it carried no dread. Only blessing. Heaven says, your test is not loss, but abundance. When blessings return, gratitude must guard the door. The covenant that saved your family will last as long as your thanks do. Tap like to seal your faith in this promise, subscribe for more Archangel Michael messages, and comment, "Gratitude is my protection." Because the true miracle isn't freedom from trouble, it's remembering who freed you. Weeks turned into months, and peace no longer felt fragile. It lived in the corners of the house, in the laughter of your grandchildren, in the way sunlight moved differently across the floor. It was as if the air itself remembered heaven's voice. Each day carried a quiet kind of confidence, like you were walking beneath an unseen canopy of protection. You noticed something small but powerful. Everything that had once caused anxiety now flowed with ease. Bills paid themselves on time. Opportunities came without strain. But most miraculous of all, your grandchildren began to reflect the very light that had been planted in your heart. The eldest started volunteering at a shelter, saying, "I just feel like helping people brings me peace." The youngest began drawing pictures of angels without ever being told the story. Each one was a reflection of the unseen covenant. One evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, laughter filled the air so full it almost seemed tangible. Then, without warning, the lights flickered, not in fear, but like a signal. Everyone paused. The air shimmered faintly, and a warm current moved through the room. You knew that energy. Archangel Michael was near. You didn't see his full form this time, only the shimmer of gold in the corner of your eye and the deep, steady calm that followed. His voice filled the room, gentle and strong. "Beloved light-bearer, the covenant stands. The blessing has taken root, and now the harvest begins. But remember, prosperity must be passed, not possessed." He continued. "Your grandchildren will carry this light beyond your years. Each act of kindness they perform will release a ripple through time. Every time they forgive, give, or comfort someone, the flame will brighten again. This is how divine wealth multiplies, not in numbers, but in goodness." You felt tears rise again, not from sadness but from awe. "So it doesn't end with me?" "Nothing of heaven ever ends," he said. "It evolves. You have rewritten the spiritual DNA of your bloodline. Fear no longer runs in their veins, faith does." The grandchildren grew still, sensing something. The eldest whispered, "Grandma, it feels warm in here." You smiled through tears. "That's heaven saying hello." Michael's tone deepened, like thunder spoken softly. "One more instruction: each year, on this day, gather them. Tell them the story. Not of curse and fear, but of how light won. The story itself will keep the blessing alive. Words are living things, they either bind or bless. Let yours bless." As his voice faded, a gentle light flickered across the walls, forming what looked like feathers glowing faintly in gold. The room smelled faintly of rain and roses. Then silence. Everyone sat still, breathing the same sacred air. The youngest child smiled and said, "Can we pray?" You nodded, heart overflowing. As you all joined hands, the warmth grew stronger, flowing from one person to the next like a circuit of grace. That night, when you finally lay in bed, you felt a peace deeper than sleep. You looked toward the window, and for just a moment, you saw a figure outlined in light, wings folded, watching over the house. You whispered, "Thank you, Michael." His voice echoed softly in your heart. The light will never leave this house again. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the yard like a crown, and everything looked new once more. You realized it wasn't just your family that had changed, it was the very soil you lived on. It carried a new vibration, a new memory, a new law: gratitude equals protection. Heaven says, when one generation listens, 1,000 are blessed. The flame you carry will burn in your bloodline forever. Pass it on, speak it often, live it daily. Tap like to affirm this covenant, subscribe for more Archangel Michael messages, and comment, "My family walks in divine favor." Because the true inheritance of heaven is not gold, it's peace that never runs out. Years passed like pages in a sacred book, each one written with a calmer hand than the last. The world changed around you, new cities, new machines, new fears, but inside your family, there was something constant, something the noise of time could never erase. It was peace. The kind that breathes through laughter and endures through storms. Your grandchildren grew, and their lives unfolded in quiet miracles. The one who had once been restless now ran a foundation that built homes for the poor. Another became a teacher, explaining to children that money is a mirror, it reflects the soul that uses it. Each of them, unknowingly, carried the code Michael had planted through you. Sometimes, when they faced challenges, they would feel the same warmth you once knew, the pulse in the chest, the scent of roses, the sudden certainty that everything was going to be all right. They didn't know to call it an angel's presence, but their hearts recognized it anyway. One autumn evening, as the sun fell in bronze light over the fields, you sat on the porch, a blanket around your shoulders. The house hummed softly, the same hum you'd heard all those years ago when the curse had first broken. It had become the song of your family now. You closed your eyes and whispered, "They kept the promise." The air shifted. You didn't need to open your eyes to know who stood beside you. The light changed, and Archangel Michael's calm voice filled the air again. "Yes, they did," he said. And heaven took note. He appeared as he had on the first night, towering, radiant, but his sword was gone. In its place was a simple staff made of light. The time for battle had ended, the era of guardianship had begun. "You have completed your circle," he said. "The fear that haunted your ancestors has been rewritten into faith. The same energy that once cursed your line now funds compassion across generations." That is the miracle of transformation. Heaven never wastes pain, it recycles it into purpose. You smiled, tears wetting your face. "So it's over?" "Over and begun," Michael said gently. "Each act of kindness your family performs will echo into eternity. You have turned your name into a blessing." You looked toward the horizon. I can feel them, you said softly. The ones who came before us, they're at peace now. They rest in light, Michael said. Their prayers complete through your obedience. When they look upon earth, they see your family glowing like a constellation, one thread of light woven through time. He stepped closer, holding out his staff. A golden flame appeared at its tip. The covenant will never fade, he said. But one day, each family must raise a new keeper of the flame. When your time comes to return home, one of your grandchildren will see a feather at dawn. That will be the sign that heaven has chosen them. You laughed softly, peace overflowing. So it begins again. Light always does, Michael answered. That is heaven's secret, every ending is a seed. The staff brightened until the air shimmered. He looked at you one last time. Rest now. The story is written, the covenant sealed, the generations safe. You have walked faithfully, and heaven remembers. As his words faded, the world filled with quiet brilliance. You felt lighter, not just in body but in spirit. The porch, the house, the very air seemed wrapped in gold. Then, slowly, the light drew inward, folding around you like a gentle embrace. When it faded, Michael was gone. But something new remained, a faint symbol etched into the wood of the porch, glowing softly, a single feather encircled by flame. It pulsed once, twice, and then stayed, eternal. You smiled, whispering one last time, "We remember." Above the house, a soft wind carried the scent of roses into the night. The stars shimmered brighter than usual, as if bowing in recognition. The covenant of light was complete. And somewhere, unseen, heaven smiled. Heaven says, when a soul listens, generations live. The promise of light never expires. The work you do in love will outlive you. It becomes your legacy, your eternal wealth. Tap like to receive this generational blessing, subscribe for more Archangel Michael messages, and comment, "My legacy is light." Because the greatest inheritance isn't gold, it's the peace that outlasts time. Years drifted by, gentle as leaves carried by a calm river. Your hair turned silver, your steps slowed, yet your eyes still glowed with the quiet knowing that only those touched by heaven carry. Every sunrise felt like a whisper from the divine, "You are remembered." Your grandchildren had grown into pillars of strength, good hearts, steady hands, unshakable faith. The house you once filled with prayer now pulsed with laughter and music. No fear lingered in its walls. It was more than a home now, it was a sanctuary. One autumn morning, you sat by the same window where your first vision had come decades ago. The world outside shimmered with gold leaves and soft wind. The warmth of the sunlight wrapped around you like an old friend. You closed your eyes, and in that stillness, you heard it again, the hum. The sound that bridges heaven and earth. It was fainter this time, but perfect. Then, softly, a presence entered the room. Not bright or overwhelming, just steady and kind. "Beloved light-bearer," the voice said, and your heart leapt. It was Archangel Michael once more, but gentler now, almost human in his grace. "The covenant you carried has reached maturity. The seed you planted has grown into a garden that touches generations unseen. Heaven called, and you answered. Now the cycle completes." You smiled. "Is it time?" "Yes," he said. "But not to end, only to ascend. You have become what you carried. You are the flame now." He extended his hand, and in his palm burned a single, pure white light. "This is the light that was once given to you through a feather, then through a flame, then through words. It is you now, your essence refined through obedience." As he spoke, you saw flashes of your life, not the pain, not the fear, but the moments of love, the prayers whispered through tears, the nights you stayed awake protecting, forgiving, believing. Each memory turned into light and joined the glow before you. Michael looked toward the window. Outside, your grandchildren gathered in the yard, unaware of what was happening inside. The youngest held something in her hand, a feather. It shimmered faintly, glowing with the same light as his palm. "You see," he said, smiling. "The promise continues. Heaven has chosen its next keeper." Tears rolled down your cheeks, but there was no sorrow in them, only awe. "She's so young." "So were you, once," he replied. Light does not measure years. It recognizes readiness. He placed the flame in front of you, and it hovered there, waiting. "This is the crossing," he said. "When a soul that lived for love returns to the source it came from. You will not die, you will dissolve into memory, into light, into every prayer your family ever prays." You nodded, hands trembling. "Will they know I'm still here?" "They will feel it," Michael said. "Every time peace fills a room for no reason. Every time laughter returns after grief. Every time roses bloom out of season, that will be you." You looked one last time at the world outside, then at the angel beside you. "Thank you," you whispered. Michael smiled, radiant and calm. "You walked faithfully. Now walk freely." The flame drifted toward your heart, and as it touched you, warmth flooded every part of your being. You exhaled softly, eyes closing, not in death, but in transformation. Outside, the wind rose gently, swirling through the yard. The youngest child looked up from the feather in her hand. It began to glow brighter, and she gasped. "Grandma," she whispered. In that instant, the whole house shimmered with golden light. The family paused, feeling something sacred move through them, a warmth, a love too pure for words. The wind carried the scent of roses one final time. From above, Michael's voice echoed softly, not as command, but as song. The flame returns, the promise lives. One light leaves to awaken another. This is the eternal return. The feather in the child's hand stopped glowing but stayed warm. She smiled without knowing why. Inside the house, peace settled permanently, thick, holy, absolute. The air carried the faintest sound, like a heartbeat echoing from heaven. The lineage was sealed. The covenant eternal. The light unbroken. Heaven says, when a soul lives in faith, even death becomes legacy. Your obedience lights generations. Your memory becomes their protection. Tap like to honor the promise, subscribe for more Archangel Michael messages, and comment, "My light never ends." Because when one heart fulfills its purpose, heaven writes a new beginning for everyone who follows.